Subway now has breakfast. Enjoy the steak and cheese omelet on toasty footlong flatbread and spice it up with fiery Chipotle Southwest sauce and jalapenos. And don't forget to grab lunch to go too, like the $5 footlong BLT. Try it with banana peppers and ranch, only at Subway. Subway, eat fresh. The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the Sports Guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. Sunny day in Southern California, as always. On the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, our old friend, whose paperback is out in bookstores and online, Eating the Dinosaur. Go get it if you haven't read it already. He refuses to tweet about it, so he has to leave it to people like me to promote him. Chuck Klosterman, what's happening?
Not much. Hey, I know that you always mention the weather in LA when you do these. Is that just sort of your like radio underpinnings that you always feel like you should give like the time and temperature?
I like to remind myself why I live here because sometimes I feel stupid.
Well,
because I'm away from all my teams, and sometimes that I have to remind myself that the main reason we live here is because it's 75 degrees every day usually. That's fair.
well,
right?
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, I need some sort of opening. What would you suggest?
I know. Hey, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying how it's because there was a bunch where you were like, "Oh, it's cloudy today," and I was like, "Oh well, I guess it's cloudy out there."
It is. Well, I don't like when it's cloudy. It affects the BS Report. I like when it's sunny. It puts me in a good mood. You have a LeBron theory you want to unleash on us, so let's start there.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about this. I'm not even sure if this is necessarily 100% true, but I thought it was interesting. And it seems like most people have the exact same perception on this whole situation. They just kind of frame it in different ways, but their opinion is kind of the same. And a friend of mine brought up an idea that I've been thinking about, and I'm wondering what you think. Okay, I was on vacation a couple of weeks ago with a bunch of my friends, and one of my friends is a guy named Chris Ryan. I need to mention him because it's kind of his thing. He's a hip-hop writer and soccer writer. We're sitting around talking about LeBron. And he starts comparing LeBron to the hip-hop artist Drake. How familiar are you with Drake?
I am, I would say, familiar.
Yeah,
I mean, I know what's going on, and I know his songs and all that stuff.
Well, okay, he's like this guy. He's from Canada. He was on that show Degrassi. He's in a Sprite commercial. He has this relationship like with Lil Wayne. He's close with Kanye. He's just kind of like this, like the cool guy in hip hop right now, or so it would seem.
Yeah.
And my friend Chris was talking about how him and LeBron have these certain similar characteristics that they just have no interest in legacy. Like the idea of legacy, in fact, seems kind of idiotic to them. And their credo seems to be this phrase, "Only God can judge me," which I think was like a Master P record. I don't know that much about hip hop, but it's sort of this phrase is very common sort of now in youth culture, this idea that only God can judge me.
I actually think Bo Duke said it in Dukes of Hazzard. I think that's where it started.
I think it might have been not in the movie, in the TV show. That might have been Coy Duke, actually.
It might have been when they replaced them. You're right. It might have been the fake cousins. I can't remember. All right, go ahead.
Right. So anyway, we're talking about this, and the next day I was still thinking about it, and it is true. Like this idea that I was reading the Sports Illustrated article about the whole Miami Heat situation. There's like Barkley in there saying, if I was 25, I'd never done this, And you did that podcast with Buzz Bissinger, and you guys were both sort of talking about how this is bad for LeBron. It's the worst choice he could have made for all these sort of reasons that most of us would sort of agree with. And yet I thought, well, what if, though, what we're seeing is real confidence? Like, not the kind of confidence, not what we've come to accept as what we think a confident person is like. But what if this is a real kind of confidence that's unrelated to how others perceive them? I mean, we keep talking, like we were talking about, or we're thinking about how, like, LeBron's approval rating went down. okay? Like ESPN has this statistical metric that tracks someone's approval rating, and the day after he announces he's going to Miami, it just plummets, you know?
Yeah.
But when you think about that, that's completely unrelated to sports, which is not a subjective thing. It doesn't, like, there's no, the games can be settled in a quantitative fashion.
All right, hold on.
So
Quick interjection, and then keep going. The only thing I would say to that is that LeBron, since basically late 2006, has been the one telling us that he wants to be a global icon and the biggest sports/celebrity that professional sports has ever produced. Mm-hmm. So I do think that has to factor in, because if he cares about being the global icon, then he would care about his approval rating, or he would, at least it would seem like it would make sense for him to be concerned that his approval rating dropping that drastically would affect his pursuit to be the global icon. Now, go ahead.
True. Well, that's absolutely true, right? If what he said when he said those things was actually how he felt, isn't it possible that even at the age of 25, or whatever it is now, he sort of realized that what he wants out of life is different than sort of this kind of coded language that we just assume major athletes are supposed to speak, right?
Or what we want them to, or how we want them to feel.
Well, or just that maybe he's lost interest in having that kind of mediated relationship with fans. Because, we were talking about this thing of how he left Cleveland. And how he really, and everyone agrees on this, right? That it seems like he went out of his way to stick it to Cleveland.
Yep.
Okay? Like, it almost by saying that, I'm going to do this show, when there was all these rumors he was going to Miami, anybody who was a Cavaliers fan had to think to themselves, there's no way he's going to do this unless he's coming back to Cleveland. You know?
Yep.
It seems like a malicious or whatever. Well, that could be symbolic of lots of different things, right? Now, we were talking one time about, you sort of feel like this Dante West rumor.
Delonte West.
What?
Delonte West.
Yes, it's true. And that he felt sort of like this is something that everybody in their organization knew about, and by not telling him, he had sort of animosity toward the franchise and the organization.
Hold on, let me interject one more second, because I'm not positive we're allowed to talk about this, although I feel like we should, because look, whether it's true or untrue, and ESPN isn't in the policy, I don't think, of just running rumors as news or all that. I did talk about it in chat. At some point, this took a life of its own, and if you look at the way LeBron left and the way he played those last couple games, and the fact that, if you watch this team the last 2-3 years, how tight they were, they had all these little rituals, this was like one of the most close-knit NBA teams I think any of us had ever seen. And by the end of that Boston series, that was gone. And then he does the decision, does not mention these players once, has not mentioned them since he left, has not said, like, goodbye to my brother Mo Williams in a tweet, none of that stuff. It's almost like he's gone out of his way to distance himself from everybody on that team and the organization.
Except for Ilgauskas seems to be his only close friend on that team now.
Right.
That
was the only one. So, it does make you wonder. And I hypothesized in a mailbag, and I couldn't go as far as I could, but something happened.
Well, we don't need to even talk about what the rumor itself is. I think most people listening to this show know what we're talking about, okay?
Right.
And that's one possibility, right?
Yeah.
It's possible that this was the spur that made him not just want to go somewhere else, but almost sort of embarrass the franchise. But what if he sort of felt like Paul Newman and Cool Hand Luke? And at some point he just got sick of all these other people living off him and sort of living their life through him. And while not necessarily being any less egocentric. You know what I'm saying? Like, his view of himself didn't change, but his view of how his life affects other people may have changed. And
Well, hold on. I have another interjection. Because you're on a cell phone, so I have to step in because we don't. If you're on a landline, I can jump in easier. But so there's a couple things that would help that hypothesis. Which, first of all, Remember when he passed up the game-winning shot in that playoff game a few years ago, and everybody's like, what are you doing? Jordan never passes up that shot. You remember that whole thing? I think it was I'm going to say it was 4 years ago. He played unselfishly, and he made the right play. But yet it wasn't the right play because Michael Jordan would have done it, and if you're the best guy on a pretty crappy team, you have to kind of control the team's destiny. So he had that. 2009, plays out of his mind in the playoffs, has one of the best 13-game runs I think anybody in the history of the NBA has had in the playoffs. His team sucked. They were overmatched. Dwight Howard ran amok. They had no answer for Haydu. It was just a bad matchup, and they had no shot at winning. He was amazing in those playoffs. I mean, he made the one-game winning shot. I think he averaged, for those 13 games, it was something like 35, 9, 10. So some crazy thing that we've only seen a couple times in NBA history, and everybody afterwards said LeBron didn't do enough. Then we go into this Boston series this year. His team completely self-combusts around him. He has a bad game in Game 5. Now, I personally think something happened. He was so detached, whatever. But, he had a bad game. His team couldn't survive a bad game by him. They lost by 25. Unlike Kobe, he never had the luxury of being able to have a bad game. And I think all that pressure and all these things, and it was like he could never win unless he carried them and he was just perfect all the time. Maybe that wore him down. Is it possible?
That's totally possible, and the argument you're making, I think, is probably sort of the conventional wisdom on this. But I want to ask you about something else related to what you just said.
Wait a second. You think that's the conventional wisdom? Because I think the conventional wisdom is that this guy is kind of more of a follower than a leader, and he wanted to be on a great team but not have to do all the work for it.
That's the conventional belief.
Yeah.
Conventional wisdom is the idea among people who sort of follow this for real. I mean, there's always the conventional belief, which is what the average person off the street will believe, and then the conventional wisdom is kind of like what the informed person thinks.
Well, because my only problem with in 2010, he had a really good team. The Verja was hurt and was playing probably at 65, 70%. But the bottom line is they had a lot of weapons. They had size. They could play small. They could play big. He didn't have to score 35 points for them to beat a good team. They just didn't play well. More importantly, he didn't play well. But I went to Game 3 in the Boston series when they won by 30, and that was one of the biggest annihilations I've seen in person, and he destroyed the Celtics. And, they weren't great. They weren't well coached, and the pieces were a little weird. But, man, the whole argument that he was on a crap team last year is not a good argument, I don't think.
Okay, but let's just get away from those. Are all interesting specifics. But let's get away from specifics for 1 second. Okay, I got to ask you something. Okay, we were talking about LeBron passing up that shot late in the game, and this was really problematic, right? Because it's supposed to be his responsibility.
Yep.
That's certainly what we all sort of have come to believe, right? That the best player is supposed to take the last shot in any key situations. That's how you prove you're the best player. Well, I was thinking about something, though. Okay. Now, you've read Drive, and I'm sure you've probably read Drive 10 times. Okay.
Yep.
Larry Bird always took the last shot at the end of games. What was his reasoning for taking the last shot? He said it many times.
It was that they had the best chance to win if he took it.
Nope, that's not what it was.
What was it?
Bird's argument was always, I know I've practiced the most of anybody on this team. I shoot more shots, I put more time in, therefore I should be the one taking the shot. I have the best chance of making it. I mean, the bottom line, what you're saying is true. Yeah. But his real argument was that I put the most time in. It's not confidence based on self. It's confidence based on process. In
and
theory,
repetition.
If Danny Ainge had started working 18 hours a day during the off season, according to that logic, Bird would have conceded this to Ainge because he would have had a better chance of making the shot. So there's Bird always takes the last shot. We see that as confidence. Okay. Think about, I think it was like the 1994 playoffs when Chicago was playing the Knicks or something, and it was coming down to the end of the game. This is when Jordan wasn't part of the team.
94.
And Pippen pulls himself out of the game because he wants the last shot, and they give it to Tony Kukoc. I mean, Kukoc makes it, and Pippen is embarrassed. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you say Pippen's desire to take the last shot in that situation was a reflection of his confidence? I would say it's a reflection of his insecurity. So it's not always the person who needs to always take the last shot, whether it be, Jordan or Kobe, Bird, whoever, Reggie Miller, whoever we're talking about, okay? In these rarefied examples, a lot of times the person who wants to take the shot really should, because it does give their team the best chance of winning. But sometimes it has more to do with a need to be perceived as the person who takes last shots.
Yep.
And what if LeBron doesn't have that strange kind of narcissism? I mean, everyone's been calling him a narcissist, right? But a narcissist isn't somebody obsessed with themselves. It's someone who's obsessed with how they are perceived by others, their image. I mean, like the story of Narcissus or whatever. It's like he looks at himself in the river, and he can't stop looking at himself. He loves the way it looks, the way his perception is. What if LeBron's confidence is real in that he doesn't need to take shots at the end of games? It doesn't matter to him. It doesn't make him feel differently about who he is. That would explain a lot why it would suddenly seem obvious that you would want to play on whatever team had the most good guys.
Yeah, well, hold on. Back to Pippen for a second. You know, I've defended him on that for this reason. I don't defend him I defend him for being upset. I don't defend him for not going back in. But, you know, Jordan was out that whole year. Pippen was always wired as a supporting guy, the guy who could do anything and ultimately was like the Robin to Jordan's Batman. Jordan left, and they basically asked Pippen to be Batman. And he had always been Robin his entire career. And so he had to kind of work himself into that mindset of, all right, in the last 3 minutes of every game, if I don't play well, we lose. And they played really well, and they won, I think, 55 games, get to the second round. You know, this is a huge win against the Knicks. And at that point, Jackson had built him up to this whole, you know, frenzy of we don't need Jordan, you know, you can do this. And I think he felt like he had the rug yanked out of him a little bit. But wait a second, you spent the last 7 months telling me that I was the guy. You built my confidence up, and now you're designing a play for Tony Kukoc, so I'm not the guy? I think he felt like, it's weird, but I think he felt betrayed.
But
Does that make sense?
That's a great example. The phrase, he built my confidence up.
Yes.
My confidence is not internal. My confidence relies on Phil Jackson and my teammates and the people of Chicago and the media agreeing that I'm the best player on this team.
Yes.
And that's not real confidence. The
You're right.
real confidence I'm talking about is this idea of someone who doesn't just say, only God can judge me, but someone who actually believes that their actions don't matter to other people as long as they're comfortable with that decision. And, like, I'm not a huge, you know, I think people might think because I lived in Akron and stuff that I'm this huge LeBron fan. I mean, I love watching him play. I don't really consider myself in his camp in any way. But I was noticing just how uniform the criticism of him became after this. Yeah. And I just started thinking, you know, a lot of times when everybody suddenly agrees on something, that often proves to be untrue. When that universal thought is so, dramatic and changes so quickly. So I'm wondering, like, what, you know, maybe people need, or I feel like we need to sort of examine other explanations for this that are possible instead of just assuming this perception is true. Because if what I'm saying is right, all these, well, okay, another example. Remember a few years ago, I guess maybe a bunch of years ago now, when Allen Iverson was always being criticized for not caring about the game. Yeah. I think this was around the time they were actually naming the 50 best players of all time. And these guys had to make these big overtures that they cared about the history of the NBA. And one of the reasons we're supposed to forgive Kobe for all his other, you know, indiscretions is that, like, he watches tape of Elgin Baylor. And this makes him a great guy because he honors history, you know. And from a media perspective, that I can see how that works. I mean, I love the history of the NBA. You love the history of the NBA. We're going to gravitate toward guys who make references to this thing that we love. But why is it a modern person's responsibility to show respect for a past that, for the most part, does not really respect them? I mean, I think that's what you see with, like, you know, with somebody like Drake or something. It's not like people, like, you know, it's not like hip-hop historians and people who came before him are showing a great deal of respect to him because in both hip-hop and in basketball, the fans seem to be obsessed with the recent past.
Yep.
You know, we're obsessed with basketball from the 70s and 80s. I know that we both are. Okay.
Yeah.
We're all that no matter how much NBA we watch now, we're in our like. If somebody said, "Who is your favorite team?" I would say like the '86 Celtics.
Yeah.
Like I would specifically put the year in. You know.
Yeah.
So it's odd that we have this assumption that somebody has a problematic persona if they don't have almost like a reverence or to lionize history, or if they don't sort of understand that they're supposed to pretend to. I don't think anybody thought that Allen Iverson is some NBA historian, but when he said the right things, when he said like, oh yeah, you know, I love Nate Archibald or whatever, it's like, oh, okay, he's kind of like wearing a suit to your job interview.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you're not going to wear a suit every day, but you're supposed to know that you wear a suit for a job interview.
It's funny because I wrote about this a tiny bit in that 2-part mailbag I did a week and a half ago, and I was actually going to come up with a name for this, but then I had another name theory, and I didn't want to do two. But I do think once you turn 30 and you get older than that, you start assuming that the people that you watch in sports approach sports from the same perspective that you do. And I think when somebody's 25 or under, all bets are off. And the example I used in the mailbag, which I think is the most relevant one, is the Notre Dame football. Like, people like us who are over 30, well, we can't believe that Notre Dame doesn't have a good football team.
Oh, yes. Okay.
It just seems like, well, but wait, it's Notre Dame football. They should always have a good team. And we don't realize that, you know, that has a shelf life of from when you're great to when you're not great. The shelf life's like 5 years. And then you're an 18-year-old kid. You just look at who's been good for the previous 5 years. And you say, oh, Florida's good. I want to play there. Oh, Miami's good. Nebraska's pretty good. You don't think about Notre Dame because you didn't grow up with it. So I think what you're talking about with the NBA players, yeah, maybe this is a new generation of people that don't give a crap, that Elgin Baylor and Oscar paved the way once upon a time, and Russell, and that, you know, Bird and Magic carried the game in the 80s. I don't know if LeBron cares. I think you're right.
Well, and also sports are very different. Sports is the one idiom where people are supposed to care about their legacy. Like, you know, people criticized Bill Clinton when he was a president because they thought he's too concerned about how he will be remembered, okay? When George W. Bush was president, he went out of his way to say, I don't think about my legacy. I don't care about my legacy. If you talk to a writer, if you talk to a filmmaker, and they seem really obsessed with how they'll be remembered after they're dead or how their work is going to hold up in 25 or 30 years, it seems problematic. It seems like they're not really interested in what they're producing. It seems more like they're interested in the idea of like sort of being, you know, of just existing beyond their own life or whatever. But in sports, you're supposed to care about your legacy.
Well, we want you to care.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's when I say you're supposed to, it's like it's people like us. But we're the people who do that. We're the people who do these weird things and make these weird demands on athletes that make situations like LeBron seem so confusing.
Here's my counter to that, though. Because I think the only clue we've had that LeBron has put some thought into it was the Sports Illustrated article that Ian Thompson wrote when the three guys were on the cover. And by the way, Wade in the middle with the two guys behind him, which was very interesting. But, you know, LeBron kind of came out and said, you know, I won't have to score every night. I could kind of be more like Magic. Maybe I can get 15 assists one night. Maybe I could try to average a triple-double. And you know, that was for the first time made me think maybe he's just been miscast this whole time. Maybe that's his destiny, to be Magic 2.0, to be the 285-pound Magic Johnson, to be the facilitator guy who doesn't have to take over, who creates shots for everybody, who's a mismatch, who has some exciting plays, who has that Dr. J side of him that, you know, he's so explosive and so exciting to watch, but isn't there to cut people's throats out every night. Because if he was, he would be working out his game every summer, and he doesn't. The season ends, and he doesn't work out his game again until the season starts. And these other guys, you know, you mentioned Bird. These guys really had no other hobbies. Jordan had just gambling, golf, and playing basketball. And every summer he would say, all right, I'm going to work on my fall away this year. I think I can move it from 10 feet to 16 feet. That's what I'm going to do all summer. Kobe says, I need to learn a low post game this summer. I'm going to go work with Hakeem Olajuwon. LeBron goes and makes a movie, or he promotes a documentary. I don't think he cares.
Well, but here's okay. Well, these are very interesting ideas. Okay, first of all, say you were saying that maybe he was miscast, and actually he's Magic 2.0.
Yes.
Isn't it more likely that he's been miscast by saying he's like anyone? I mean, if he becomes the point guard for the Heat,
I think he's going to.
He's not going to be a Magic-like point guard. He's going to be a very different kind of player, one that I don't know who I would necessarily compare him with. Magic, because he was a 6'9" point guard and was very strong, and they could play him at a 4 if they wanted. They could do all these things. And those things, yeah, that's similar. But there's probably more differences between them than similarities.
No, but
definitely. But yet we feel this desire to say, like, well, okay, how can we understand this new thing? Well,
right.
Let's compare him to the past, and then when it doesn't work out, we can say he doesn't work hard enough.
No, but I would say I do think he really could be used the same way. And Riley was there for the mid to late 80s Magic, when Magic became more of a scorer, and they posted him up, and they played him in all these different positions, and the offense ran through him. It wasn't totally the same Showtime Magic. So there's two Magics, and you can't confuse first Magic with second Magic. Second Magic was a little more half court. They were able to play him at point guard, which was a huge mismatch on the other end for anybody. And then with Miami here, if they play Wade and LeBron in the backcourt together and they say, screw it, we don't need a point guard, that's going to be a huge deal. You know, I don't know how teams are going to match up with that. And I think Dwayne Wade could potentially guard the other team's point guards. I don't know how well he could do, or they could play his own. There's little tricks they can play, but the point is, on the other side, if they're playing LeBron at point guard with all guys who are 6'8" and over except for Wade, that will kind of resemble what Magic had in the Lakers in those later years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you got to find a comparison, that's the best comparison, because you got to find somebody else who's sort of in the same tier of player as LeBron, and that's a limited. You have like 10 or 12 guys to choose from in the history of the NBA.
Yeah.
But you're still miscasting it, because you're saying, like, this is the closest thing we can fit him into. This is what I mean when I don't know if maybe the idea, yes, maybe in the quote in Sports Illustrated, he said, maybe I could be like Magic Johnson. Maybe that could be my role. But how did that quote come into that conversation?
Because maybe the writer prompted him, yeah.
Did the reporter bring up the idea of Magic Johnson? Does whoever does media training for the Heat say, well, you might want to associate yourself with things they can understand, compare yourself to Magic Johnson instead of Jordan? I don't know.
Well, let's talk about what is his destiny as a player, and what's the thing that makes him different than everybody else. The thing is that he can play 4 positions and do basically anything you need him to do on the basketball court. Like even Magic, who could also play 4 positions offensively, was a huge weak link defensively. And they, especially from, I'd say 86 on, was they just couldn't hide him, and they would have to have him guard small forwards and power forwards, and it was a problem that just never went away.
Well, yeah,
LeBron could guard anybody.
They really killed people, when they played against the team with like a non-scoring 2-guard or a non-scoring 3 that you could cover and not beat
yes.
out. Yeah.
And LeBron can guard anybody on the court, which is what, when you say, like, yeah, he's different than Magic. Yeah, he's different in that respect. He's not nearly as good of a passer, I don't think. I think he's a good passer, but Magic was probably the best passer of all time. But just the flexibility that Magic had, that reminds me of this. Other than that, I mean, obviously we've never seen anything like this. These are 2 of the best 3 guys in the league, and they're both perimeter guys, and they're both on the same team. The last time that happened was Elgin Baylor and Jerry West, which was 10 million years ago. So, yeah, maybe we throw out every historical reference here.
Well, I mean, yeah, to me, the thing, LeBron can play 4 positions. I just think the thing that makes him different is purely his physical power.
Yes.
And, I mean,
the Bo Jackson.
It does seem that, except when they would have Shaq on the floor, the one thing that LeBron could seemingly do whenever he wanted to was just go to the middle of the paint and go to the rim.
Yep.
And that was that sort of it sort of had that sense of like a 10th grader playing with 8th graders. Like, and
ironically, that's also Dwayne Wade's best skill. And that's when you start thinking about these guys together, like, on paper, Orlando, Dwight Howard should be able to go crazy against this team because Chris Bosh sucks on defense, and I think Dwight Howard could just demolish them. But they're going to be driving at Dwight Howard for 4 straight quarters trying to get him in foul trouble. And Dwight Howard loves getting in foul trouble. So it actually might be the worst possible matchup for him because he might not be able to stay on the floor. And that's like, these guys combined, it might be 25 free throws a game. It's a little frightening.
Well, so now are you still sort of trying to convince yourself that
I'm over it? No, because once they added Miller and Haslam, and then I realized that the plan was not even to get a point guard and to just go with a big lineup. That's when it became a little frightening. Hold on, I want to go back to your point about the legacy thing. Would you agree that Jay-Z is somebody that put a ton of thought into this over the years?
Boy, did he put a lot of thought into his legacy?
His next career move, not only how it related to the other career moves that he made, but as an overall mosaic of Jay-Z.
I think that, I'm no hip-hop expert. I guess I feel that Jay-Z's main concern was his business model. And can I fit this into music? Can I fit this into fashion? Can I fit this into advertising? I think that in terms of legacy, I guess, he would. Compared to Drake, I guess he is technically from a different generation. I don't know. Why do you ask that?
Well, because you were talking about how Drake and LeBron are similar, and that Drake doesn't care about his legacy and all that. Jay-Z to me seems like somebody who is very calculating in a good way about the choices that he makes. And like for instance, I don't think Jay-Z would ever do the decision and do that to the city of Cleveland. I think he would have understood the ramifications of that and cared about it.
He would never burn New York. He would never come out and
be like, I'm leaving New York. Yeah. And even I hear that song, oh God, I can't remember the name of it. The New York song that they play constantly. And if you're in a New York club, you're going to hear it once an hour. Even that song, I truly feel like Jay-Z was sitting on his deck, whatever beach house he has one day, thinking, I should create a song that they would play that has New York in the title, and every time they play it at a club, they'll have to play it because New York's in the title, and it'll make people think of New York, and they'll play it at Yankee games. And I really think he put thought into that and then created the song. I don't think it was a song that came to him.
That's possible. Then it becomes a question of if you do something that's good, does it matter if the original thinking was kind of craven? I always wonder about the Semisonic song, Closing Time. That seems like a song that was written by someone who was I bet people will always play this when the bar is closing, and I bet if there's ever a movie where we need to sort of, represent someone trying to figure out whether or not they're going to hook up with someone at closing time, this would be the obvious song to use, Now, that's the best song Semisonic ever made. It's kind of a great song.
Well, you're leaving out the best example ever, which is Randy Newman's I Love L.A., which is a genius song. It's terrible, but it's 25, 30 years now of a shelf life.
Yeah, I know, but that song means something different than what I think you think it means.
It means he loves L.A.
Well, okay. I also have a hard time imagining Randy Newman could see anything he did as being used at mainstream sporting events in the future. If so, that's not craven. That would be incredible genius.
I was watching The Naked Gun this weekend, and they used I Love L.A. in the baseball scene, and I meant to Google to see when Joe Mead, you alive?
I'm alive.
Can you find out when Randy Newman created I Love L.A.? Because I thought it would be funny if he created that for the Naked Gun baseball scene, and now it became the defining Los Angeles song for 24 years and counting, and is played after every Laker game. Because I do think the Dropkick Murphys, that's an example of they didn't create a song that they knew would play at the end of every Red Sox game. I don't think they...
well, I can't imagine that they did, yes. That would be pretty surprising.
But back to the LeBron legacy thing.
Originally released in 1983.
Oh, okay. So they bought it. 83. I wonder what the impetus was. But he rakes it in from that song.
What was his reason for writing that song?
Well, at that point, I don't know. See, now he might have just done a lot of coke. Back to the LeBron legacy thing. Something really interesting happened this weekend that kind of made me reconsider what I was thinking of. I don't know if you caught it. Eddie House signed with Miami. And LeBron James tweeted, "Congratulations to Eddie House for signing with Miami," only he called them Team John Dillinger. Did you see that?
No, it cut out. What would happen?
Eddie House signed with Miami.
Okay.
LeBron James tweeted his congratulations to Eddie House for signing with Miami, only he called Miami Team John Dillinger.
Okay.
Which made me think, oh, so they're going to embrace this.
Now, because of the idea of John Dillinger being a hired gun.
Yeah, he was an outlaw that was like the bad guy in America, and
isn't he also known for having a huge penis?
And that too.
Yeah,
that also,
so that could be like an inside joke about Chris Bosh or something. Who knows? You know?
Well, no, but here's the thing. So, Public Enemies was the Michael Mann movie that wasn't very good about John Dillinger. I think we were all disappointed. Johnny Depp as John Dillinger should have been good and wasn't. But that's been on HBO. It started the HBO run about 10 days ago. And he is the bad guy of America in whatever year, 1930, I can't remember. So these guys are watching it probably on HBO thinking, yeah, that's us. We're John Dillinger. That made me think that he just doesn't care at all. He's fine being the bad guy. They're fine being booed in every arena they go to, having teams come at them. They have so much confidence in the team they have. They're almost like, bring it on. So in a way, this might be the best thing that ever happened to LeBron James because it seems like he's kind of embracing this.
Okay, so here's the obvious question.
Yeah.
Why do you care that LeBron doesn't?
Why do I care that LeBron? All right, okay.
Why do you care that LeBron doesn't care? I'm just really there are a lot of different answers to this. I'm wondering what.
Yes, as a basketball fan, just pure basketball fan, selfishly, I wanted him to kind of build his own gang and try to beat the other gangs, just because I like that form of basketball the most. I wanted him to say, I'm going to build my team. Dwayne Wade can build his. Kobe will have his, so on and so on. Durant will have his. And I'm going to beat these guys. And I just felt like New York was the move if he was going to leave. And, obviously he just didn't understand what kind of... Is
it a geographic thing? If Bosh and Wade had went to Cleveland,
what would your feeling
have been then? Maybe it's just like they were trying to figure out where to have a party, and Dwayne Wade has the best house.
And that's what that's unfortunately, I think that's the answer to this. It's that simple. It's that these three guys wanted to live in South Beach and play together and create this team where they're going to be famous. I mean, they're the Christmas Day game. It's going to be announced tomorrow. It's Boston at Orlando and then Miami at Los Angeles. Probably the biggest rating, though. Could even be potentially a bigger rating than Shaq versus Kobe that first time. I think they're going to love this. And I think these guys are like, yeah, screw it. We're going to live in South Beach. We're going to kill it. We're all in our mid-20s. We're going to be the guys. We're going to sell jerseys. The weather's nice. And that was really as deep as it went. But, as we're coming to find out more and more about this, like, I am convinced. I have the dates now. Do you want to hear my dates for when this was decided?
Your what?
My dates for when this was decided.
Okay.
It was somewhere between June 17th and June 26th. These three guys decided that they would play together in Miami, Florida.
Okay.
And I think the only reason that it didn't happen, there are two reasons it didn't happen immediately. First was they didn't expect the Bulls to trade away Kirk Heinrich, which created 2 salary cap slots and made Chicago a realistic destination. So I think they had to feel that out. And then the other thing is Wade and Bosh wanted to milk this documentary thing that they're doing. And now what we didn't know at the time, which we know now, is that, first of all, Wade and Bosh have the same agent, which we knew. But what we didn't know is that they both hired the same documentary company, this company called Mark Productions. Now, I knew Bosh had hired Mark, but I didn't know Wade had hired Mark. If I knew that, then that was done. That was done in June. If those guys hired the same production, they're not going to different teams and hiring the same production company. That makes no sense. So, and you look at like Charlie Villanueva tweeted on June 27th. He was like, congratulations to Chris Bosh. He's going to Miami. Stephen A. Smith reported the next day. So something happened between Game 7 of the finals and the draft when they decided this. Now, when you think about it, it's kind of amazing that they knew this was going to happen. And they went through this whole charade of those 10 days in July and met with teams and stuff.
Well, I mean that's possible, I guess. all these things about the documentary and all those things, those are kind of like small potatoes in the grand scheme of things.
I have other stuff,
Isn't it more likely that they just, because they have these relationships outside of the court, which was never common until the last 10 or 15 years, because they have these relationships, they maybe just had a conversation that ultimately came down to one of them saying, well, why can't we do this?
Yeah,
just
and
because
I think
no one else does? You know, I mean, we're kind of, I don't like that this happened in a way either, although, I'm extremely interested about the NBA starting in a way I typically am not before the start of football.
Yeah.
And also, I feel kind of weird about being mad at LeBron for having a good life. I mean, he's living in a better city than Cleveland. He's going to play on a team where playing basketball is going to be much more fun.
Yeah.
He doesn't, you know, it is odd. It's like we always think these guys owe us so much, and they owe us anything.
Well, let me ask you this, though.
I read this call on the Huffington Post where this dude was raving about how you know these athletes do owe us something because I don't know who would have sort of the arrogance to think that a person they've never met, who they didn't elect, owes them something just because they yelled about them at an arena or bought their jersey or watched them on TV.
Well, you're a sports atheist, though.
Well, so you think they do owe you something? They owe you what? They owe you something in return for your loyalty?
There's two separate arguments, though. The first is, if LeBron had just released a statement saying he was playing with Miami, would he have gotten even 1/10 the heat that he got? No pun intended.
A tenth. He would have gotten a tenth, or it would have been bad, but not like this. It's certainly the way he did it was the biggest mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I think that colored everything. Every perception anybody had about this was colored by that initial decision. And if he had just said on July 7th, he released a statement, and then he could have even done that half-hour show 3 days later and explained why, I think people would have been like, you know what, that guy carried a fairly crappy team for 6 years. They were pretty good the 7th year, but he wants a new team and a new challenge. He wants to play with his buddies, and God bless him. I think that eventually would have been the reaction. And it was not.
I mean, people in Cleveland would have always been. You know, it is especially strange with him coming from there. I mean, that's just the way sports fans are. I mean, that's just the way people are.
He could have spun that so easily. All he could have done is. They could have turned it on the coach. You should have, the article that's leaked 4 days later of LeBron would have stayed. He felt betrayed. They didn't fire Mike Brown after 2009. They made all these bad moves. They wasted this. They didn't trade Serbiak in 2009. Blah blah blah. He didn't trust the owner. It could have gone on and on. And I think Cavalier fans at least would have said, you know what? It sucks that he left, but at least he put some thought into this and he just wanted a new team, and I get it.
Another thing that I found interesting about this deal is that, okay, this often happens with sports writing, right? A lot of sports writers are left-leaning people. And yet whenever they write about sports, they became these, like, reactionary conservatives, right? It's like they're writing about Brett Favre, and suddenly they're thinking like a guy who was born in the late 1800s. But in life, when you talk to them about their life, they're all, these progressive people. I do think it's interesting that there's really never been a case that I can remember in sports where labor so had it over management, right? Shouldn't this be the ultimate win for the working class? Now, it seems nuts to think of Dwayne Wade and LeBron James as working class people because they're so rich, and they kind of live this rarefied life. But, it's interesting to think that, they sort of, they made all these decisions. I mean, it would be great. We would love it if we heard that, a bunch of newspaper reporters all decided they were going to the Omaha World Herald. And they were going to all go there and create this super awesome newspaper, and they were going to define how much they get paid. They were going to decide what they wrote about. They were going to dictate basically what the content of the Omaha World Herald is going to be. People would say it was great. It would be like, finally, the people who do the work are in the position of power. Well, in this case, it's like labor is in power. They will be able to choose who the coach is. And wasn't Levitard saying that they're not going to hire Pat Riley? They don't want to practice that much?
I mean, there's stuff that's come out about that the Bulls thing, he cooled off on the Bulls because he expected to have the same relationship there that he had in Cleveland, where his buddies could fly in the team charter and they'd hire people that were his buddies in the front office and stuff. And the Bulls were like, we don't work that way here. And that was what killed the Bulls before it ever really got going. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by anything with this, in that direction. Let me ask you one thing though. Let's say LeBron comes out this week and gives an interview to, I don't know, Brian Windhorst. He's like, here's my side of the story. In retrospect, maybe I shouldn't have done it the way I did it. But I want everybody to know, I did put thought into this. And it came down to the fact that these guys were my friends. And I wanted to live in Florida. And I don't really care about my legacy. I just want to go out with these guys and win games and have fun and not have the weight of the world on my shoulders every night. How would people react to that?
Well, if he did that, a certain number of people would sort of forgive him. A certain number of people would not. But I got to say, if he did that, I would find it pretty pathetic.
You'd find it pathetic? Interesting.
I would find that pathetic if he did that. Because that would basically mean then that he did this thing that he really does care about how he is perceived and how marketable he is, and that he needs to be loved, he needs to be adored, his from other people, and that he did, so that would basically mean his decision to do the decision was pure stupidity and pure arrogance, and that when he realized the fallout, he tried to kind of make up for it. I would respect him much more if anytime anyone ever asked him about this, he said, only God can judge me.
I
think that would be really pathetic for a guy to do something like that, to show that kind of disregard for his fans, and then try to later on say, but I didn't really want to hurt their feelings.
Okay, so what if he does this? What if he comes out and says, you know what? So people are like, I have a LeBron James exclusive, and LeBron says in that exclusive, you know what? It's just sports. I played in Cleveland for 7 years. We had a good run. We almost won. I did the show because it was going to be fun and because it raised money for charity. And that's really all the thought I put into it. I didn't expect there to be such a fallout, but so be it. I don't really care. We raised $2.5 million, and now I'm in Miami, and I'm going to have fun there. And if people are that bent out of shape about it, get a life. What if he said that?
I think that would be great.
You would love that.
Very funny. I can't imagine him doing that. But because the way you described it, of all the things we've talked about in this entire conversation, that seems the most realistic way someone really would think. Because we're all, everybody else talks about, what do these guys think about their legacy? And then I'm saying, what if he has no thoughts about his legacy? In truth, it's probably the authenticity is in the middle, kind of. Where he's like, well, I wanted to do this. Everything I've ever done in my life, people have loved. I was pretty shocked people reacted so negatively to this. I guess I can't do everything and just just be beloved. There is a consequence sometimes, but not such a consequence that I regret it. So that's probably the closest thing to the truth. It would be weird to have lived a life where virtually everything you did was applauded.
But what if he doesn't really like fans that much? What if he thought, all I did was play hard and do the best I could as a Cavalier for 7 years, and if you guys are going to take a crap on that now, then that just proves to me that fans don't really matter and I'm in this for myself, and that as soon as the going gets tough, the fans are going to bolt on me, so screw them.
Well, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the people who loved LeBron in Northeast Ohio, where are they now? What was their love based on?
LeBron always had the contempt a little bit because, remember when he wore that Yankee hat at that Indians game and everybody in Ohio got bent out of shape, and either he did it as an FU or he really doesn't care and he's just, hey, you root for your teams, and he doesn't understand the life or death part. And maybe he just doesn't care at all.
Life or death part. There is no life or death part, Bill. There is not. That's not real.
But that's for you, though.
No,
that's for you, though.
For anyone. If you believe a sporting event is life or death, you might as well believe in a unicorn.
but for some people, it is a huge thing.
Some people believe in unicorn. Some people believe in unicorns, okay? And that's not an argument for me not saying negative things about the unicorn population. Now
but you're a sports atheist, though.
That's not a response to is it life or death.
Well, but I would say it's not life or death.
That it's, okay.
I would say it's not life or death, but I'm saying let me ask you this. Let's say a Celtic fan after Game 7 of the Lakers series cried after that game. Would you think that's acceptable?
Well, when I was in Montreal watching Game 7 of that series, and hope this guy is not listening to this podcast, but I was in a bar, and a guy did cry. A really great guy, a very sensitive, great guy, did cry. And what I basically just told him is I was like, remember how this feels, because this sadness will make you appreciate the good things that happen with this team later.
Right.
But in my mind, I did think, that's crazy. I mean, I did think to myself, in my mind, I did kind of think it's crazy. I cried when the Cowboys lost to the 49ers in 1981 in the NFC Championship. Because I was 9, okay?
Yeah.
That was the last time I cried over a sporting event. And
right.
I love sports.
You know what? As always, we went too long with Klosterman, so we're going to have to bring this to a part 2 of the BS Report. Go find that on iTunes or ESPN.com. Part 2 of the BS Report with Chuck Klosterman coming up.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.
This concludes another installment of the BS Report. And with all the talk about sports, Bill Simmons neglected to mention this very important final thought. So many of your Subway favorites are $5 footlong subs, like a $5 footlong BLT. Try it with banana peppers, spicy jalapenos, and ranch dressing, all on freshly baked bread. Or a taste-tacular $5 footlong Black Forest ham. Enjoy it piled high with pickles, olives, crunchy cucumbers, and spicy Chipotle Southwest sauce. Subway $5 footlong subs all day, every day. Subway, eat fresh.